welcome everyone to our webinar about AI agents. I'm Tom Barton. I am privileged to be able to present this information to you today. I am happy to take questions along the way. By the way, this is meant to absolutely be engaging, and I would like everyone to participate as much as possible. Probably going to take me about 20-25 minutes to go through most of the material, and the rest can be devoted to discussion. And as always, I am available anytime after this call to talk to you at any time around some of the things you've seen here today, or around some of the concepts you'd like to discuss with us at any time. It can be AI, it could be data, it could be some of our great DevOps work that we do. So please feel free to engage me at any time. With that said, I will get started around talking about the future of the workforce, AI agents. Often, a very popular topic these last couple of months for 2025. We're going to kind of go over the trends and some of the challenges, some of the business impact, a little bit of technical detail. I have a slide there, not too much, but again, feel free to ask questions along the way. This is absolutely meant to be for you guys. The first thing is the definition of agents, which, quite frankly, it's all over the map, right? I think the primary thing to think about here is autonomy, right? The ability to give the AI agent a task and to have something completed. This differs in the way that you interact with a current large language model or ChatGPT or Claude today, where you are directly querying and responding to it. So it's not query response anymore. It is a task-oriented process. That is what an agent is meant to do. Often through multiple steps, often through the use of tools. And that's a concept that I'd like you to keep in mind. The use of tools, browsers, data to research, et cetera, is another indicator that this process is agentic. If you're talking to a vendor about something. So they're meant to go on their way and then come back to you at some later date and bring back the information or the task completed that you have requested, right? A lot of companies are putting these together today. There are a lot of independent companies as well as the large language model providers. I think this is an evolving field, and we'll continue to talk about it. But they're meant to be deployed in multiple ways. Anything from code generation to customer service to process interaction. And I think that's kind of where most people would like it to go: business process organization or business process interaction. But I don't want to bury the lead here. For those of you who have been doing this for a while, it kind of sounds familiar, right? RPA, or robotic process automation, also promised us a rather automated, way to do things that we normally do in the business, the kind of hateful work, the repetitive work that you might do. RPA was going to take all that away. This was I think about 5 to 7 years ago. This was very, very popular. And it did to a degree, but the large, I think, defining factor of some of the RPA was that all the data and the processes were very deterministic, right? Meaning, there was a one-to-one kind of action and response expected. And as long as you met that action and response, your RPA, quote unquote, robot was able to go through and complete the process for you. Any failure along the way, and sometimes they could recover gracefully with retries, but any odd fact that was presented to a robot often stopped the robotic process or stopped the automation, and then you had to go clean it up yourself. So it led to failures, and if you got an 80 or 90% RPA completion rate, you were very happy, but they're not foolproof, to be sure. That's the main difference between what we see today with the agentic architectures and the promise of what agents can do for you. If they encounter something odd, they have a thought process that can work around it, and that is meant then to belay what would have normally stopped you in an RPA process. So this is very exciting to many people because we know from experience that customer engagement processes, coding, any type of business process organization is in fact not always going to be the same. And so how do you ameliorate the differences in the process? AI agents who can deal with ambiguity to a degree or non-deterministic data are that solution. So I'll stop there. That was a lot. Any comments on this so far from what everyone's been hearing? All righty, let's get into it a bit further and talk about some of the current trends. And this is really why the investment community is excited. They believe that there's going to be a surge of investment driven by the advancement of some of these processes up from last year when this kind of agentic conversation started over the next 5 to 6 years, where they believe the CAGR is going to rise pretty significantly. Today, there are very few organizations that can claim adoption. Sometimes I doubt whether this number is true, 10% of enterprise adoptions. I think there's, again, a very wide swath of things that can be classified as an quote unquote AI agent. So there's maybe a little wiggle room there. But in general, I think businesses, if they can, would like to deploy this kind of technology. Obviously, because there's a very great cost and process saving here, to be able to imbue within your enterprise, and you can have your people do something else, or you can downsize your workforce. You can change the way your workforce operates. You can change the way you operate with customers. So there is a substantial enterprise investment expected, and of course, the major players have a big say in this game. And I believe that they're going to continue to add capabilities over not only this year but for the foreseeable future to get to the place where they are the providers of agents, and that enterprise adoption will come through them. How is it going to come through them? Well, I mean, there's a ton of frameworks that are out there. OpenAI alone, and as we were writing this presentation, just the other week, OpenAI came out with new tools for building agents, where there are APIs now to kind of guide you in terms of responses and guardrails and architectures. I mean, it's really, really impressive. There are a ton of open source frameworks out there. There are some modern frameworks from Llama Index and LangChain that can help you build agentic architectures on your own. And of course, you want them to be modular, and you want them to be flexible, and you want them to fit within your enterprise. So I think that realistically, some of these tools and some of these capabilities are going to come from some of the large foundational model providers like OpenAI, like Anthropic, Microsoft and Google to a degree as well, because it's in their interest to do so, to keep you in their ecosystem. But also, let's not downplay the fact that building some of these frameworks in an agentic way that meshes with the way you and your organization and your enterprise enable business processes is not as easy as it is made out to be, right? There's still development to be done. There's still architecture to think about. There's still a deployment process that you have to go through. And so as you're thinking about building agents and importing this into your enterprise capabilities, think about how you want that accomplished, and think about, quite frankly, the staffing, the upkeep and the maintenance that's going to have to occur for this process in the future. So you may deploy an agent framework to take out a business process, maybe a complex one, maybe one that costs you a lot of money. You're still going to have to maintain that process and all its changes. You're still going to have to maintain the model in the back end. And I don't think we're talking about this enough. The model in the back end that contains the knowledge, and does some of the deep thinking and processing that agents are supposed to do. That is not free. That happens, retraining happens to have a cost to it. Fine-tuning happens to have a cost to it. So as you're building, these new frameworks and these new capabilities in your business, think about that too. Not only how do I have the staff and the capability to maintain it, have I budgeted for it properly? And, will these agents, cost me more of the long run, than the traditional BPO staff would have if I had kept them? There's a balancing act to this. So the other thing I would recommend as you're thinking about the framework for agents is also to ask any partner you have if they have a framework for analysis of what the agent may do for you, both in terms of not only the outcome, right, the beneficial outcome of the process it may replace, but also the intangibles that I just talked about, the implications to staffing, the implications for maintenance, and the costs that come along with it. If you don't think about those, you've only completed half the journey, right? This is not just a cost takeout. There are other costs involved with implementing some of these frameworks. That's probably one of the most important points I will leave you with today. So any questions around that? and certainly we'll have time for it at the end as well. All right. Now let's think about kind of the rise of AI agents and some of the architectures. I just, kind of put this here for a brief illustration of what this entails right now. The traditional language model processing flow is up at top. You get an input and you get an output. That's the kind of chat GPT stuff that we're thinking about today. We've already gone through document processing and tool use and RAGs to a degree, and multimodal workflow, which is images and, all that great stuff. But now, as we go into the advanced AI agent architectures, we're going to have to start thinking about deep memory, long-term memory, semantic database use, object database use, and then ultimately, how these models communicate with themselves. Back to the frameworks that I was talking about, there's a protocol called, the model communication protocol that Anthropic has put out, not widely adopted by everybody yet, but adopted by quite a few people. Will the MCP protocol allow for the future architecture of agents to communicate? We'll have to wait and see. Otherwise, what does that mean for you? That means you're maybe writing more AI API integrations than you would have wanted to in the first place. So there's a lot to think about as the rise of AI agents are coming in terms of the architecture that you're going to do. And I definitely recommend that you include that as part of your assessment of any BPO replacement you may want to put in there. What's that architecture look like? And again, maintenance and cost goes along with it. So now let's talk about some of the risks and limitations, and the capabilities that there. The capabilities, I think, are the main selling point, and this is, if you were to get anything from the current discussion about it, it's proactive, it's 24/7, it's, can deal with ambiguity, it can operate in real time. It can change at a conditional nature, very quickly. All the great things that agents can do, replace the workflow of individuals. And no one is doubting that, right? There's been evidence to show that it is indeed possible. But we need to talk about some of the other pieces in here that you're going to use to assess whether the promised capability is right for your organization. That has to do with the limitations of the technology as it is currently known and the risks that may be there. And both the limitations and the risk at a first point are very well related. So reliability, potential for hallucinated or incorrect information, that is the main concern, especially in any regulated industry use. I have to think that, that is going to be for the forefront to any business question or business user question that's going to come at you as you look to implement an AI agent. Now, I'd say there's an offset to this, which is if you have a process, that's okay at 80 or 90%, and you want to take it the rest of the way, maybe that's for you. I'll give you a great example. I'd worked with a client, just last year, and their very complex business process that took a lot of time that they were trying to fix was responding to RFPs. And their RFPs could be 100 pages long with a minimum of 300 qualifying questions for them. It was a banking RFP, a very niche industry that they were dealing with. And it would take on the order of about 2 weeks or so to get just one RFP out. For those of you who know the banking industry, there's compression in terms of fees and everything else. So the more RFPs that they can answer, the better their chance in terms of volume, recapturing what was their profit incentive in previous years. So their question was, how do I get to a smaller time window using agentic architectures, and get more RFPs out the door? It's very, very doable. There's documents that we could feed it from and, common sense that we can use in the training of some of these agents and to get them to about 85 to 90% in really a day or two, and then have everything be double checked and responded to by human in the last 1 or 2 days. That's a great process to take out. A 2 week process that is going to be ripe with errors. Oh, hey, those numbers aren't right. I have the latest numbers here. You're going to go through that anyway in terms of that document process, at least with RFPs. So really a great way to kind of put in, a process that is relatively low risk in terms of hallucination and a bit of inaccuracy because it's going to be human checked anyway. But there is no common sense, right, to some of these models and some of the agentic capabilities. It's simply, hey, I have these documents in front of me. Here's the data I'm working with. Unless you put in a search capability to your agent, it's not going to look for any new information. If you do that, it's going to increase the time and cost of the agent, that going to get the data for you. They all require, obviously, you can see what I'm getting at. It requires consistent oversight at some process. So back to that organizational concept that I talked about before. If you're going to implement agents, do you have the organizational capability to do oversight, to do, fine-tuning, retraining, and everything here? Can you look at the security as you should every day? Do you know the potential risks to, your cloud instance if you're using it? If you're using a local LLM model, more retraining is required, potentially less security issues, but there's a trade-off to all of these architectures, and that's some of the things that, again, a very good partner is going to have a balancing act that they can take you through in terms of the assessment of what an AI agent is going to introduce in terms of risks and limitations to your organization. The other risk I'll talk about, and quite a common misconception about the AI process is that it can deal with some ambiguity and you don't need as much data to move it along. It could not be more opposite, right? You still need a ton of data even for the language models that have been trained. You need to train this on your own data. You need a substantial amount of examples, especially for a process that you're going to replace. You need testing data, training data, you need backtesting data. There's a ton of information that you need. And as we go through conversations with our clients, it typically, I'd say with more than half of them, it goes like this. This is great. I'd love to put an agent in here. When can we start? Okay, we can start soon. All right, what do you need from me? Well, I need 3 years worth of data, and it has to be high quality data. Ultimately, I'd need some metadata information in there as well, a data dictionary, some semantic information if you have it about the process. And then they go, whoa, 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 you know, wait a minute. I don't have all that in front of me right now, or I do have it, but it's fragmented, and we got to go get it. And that's okay. And that's what leads to when the engagement starts, 80% of the engagement then is wound around the data pipelining process, the data quality process, and the data definition process, semantic data definitions, metadata, and creating data dictionaries in order for us to get to the place where the agent then has enough information that it can work from, be trained on, deployed, and work within your enterprise in a cognitive way that makes sense for you. So it's that lack of unified data strategy that really hinders most of the AI implementations. And it's not just about AI agents. It's also about just normal machine learning processes too. Any good machine learning process, any good data scientist is going to tell you you need a stable, well-reasoned set of data that has good metadata information with it to start the machine learning process. Think fraud or anything else, anything that you kind of want to do, anomaly detection, et cetera. You still need really good data. So data is the foundation of any of these implementations. And so please, as you're doing your assessments, that should be a part of, the assessment process. Where's my data at? Is there enough of it? Is it well qualified? Is it well described? Then let's think about how we can start from there. So in terms of the frameworks, that are out there to do this, there are a few. Deloitte has one. There are a few organizations that purport to have one. You can do this yourself, by the way. All the things that I just talked about are a ready-made recipe for you to build. Base it on a spreadsheet. Like this is not a complex thing. It's going to give you those data points to be able to evaluate whether you're able to start, on the agentic journey or not. I would also say that, part of this is going to be a business qualified process in terms of their data that they have to give to you. Some of the BPO data that your organization may have may be ensconced with the business. So It may not be something that you have access to in a ready nature, and you're going to have to assess them in terms of their data availability and quality and architecture and all the good stuff as you think about the business process that you want to take out or replace with an agent. So, please think about, how you're going to go after it, how you're going to assess it, have a methodology for it. Ask around. There are plenty of firms that have methodologies for it. Even the basic ones, I would say, are really great. Any starting point for you to kind of do that either on your own or with a partner. We've done these before. Typically, the assessment does not take any more than 6 weeks or so for you to kind of get through the process of like looking at your data, looking at your processes, having a conversation with the business people to talk about, what they'd like to replace or, what you'd like to do. And then coming out with a set of results that says like, all right, here's where some deficiencies, which may affect the outcome. And this means, X to you in terms of implementation. So a great thing to do, do the assessment first. It's going to de-risk everything for you. And it's also going to prevent you from going down a path of spending more than you absolutely have to, right? Um, you know, get a good assessment, do a POV first or a POC. This should not be a 3-year process, right? This should not be a project that we used to do in the past, a data assessment, a readiness, and new data warehouse project that takes 2 to 3 years to do. Those are not happening anymore. This is a fast assessment that gets you to where you want to go, pretty quickly. So now let's talk about some of the practical applications that we're actually seeing, in the real world. Obviously, customer service and support is probably the number one, thing we're seeing. I'd say and by the way, I'll leave out largely coding here. That's been done. There are plenty of companies that do that already. You all know about Copilot, probably. Well, if you don't know about Cursor is another one that's just fantastic. It's another one of those companies like fastest to 100 million in ARR ever. So coding is, I think, well covered. But the practical application on the business side is any of those support things that you may be able to do and may be able to automate. Um, and again, a caveat here, those have been done before. You've heard some of those. There's a lot of companies out there that purport to automate this. That's something that you're going to want to just be careful about. I think on the IT side and the operations side, in terms of service desks, there are large vendors out there like ServiceNow that are building in agentic processes there, and that's really neat. And so please take advantage of some of those. You may not have to build your own. That's the great news around, I'd say, the first kind of two. The other areas, marketing is rising in a huge way in terms of SEO automation, multiple automations for, content generation. So there's really some fantastic thing that's coming out. I'd say look at the danger of that too. That is relatively well documented in terms of especially on the news side, some of the flatness that happens with AI content generation. And I'd also caution, a relatively, circular approach to looking at some of these things as you're kind of looking at their capabilities. Some of them aren't really truly AI, right? Some of the marketing automations don't rise to the level of AI agents right now. They're simply, automated in some way, using an LLM in some way. So just be careful a bit there. The same is true with some of the BPO stuff. Although I think that's transitioning more to the true agentic space than ever before. Accenture's claiming that they have about 600 marketing professionals doing some of this work. Toyota says they have some. Deloitte says they have some. JP Morgan, it claims, 1 or 2 billion in AI savings. Take it for what you will, with various AI capabilities, language models, and AI agents. I still think a lot of this is to be determined. If you counterpoint some of these things with the 10% or less than 10% of adoption so far, we have a long way to go. So I think there's a lot to be seen in terms of the actual practical applications of AI agents. And these are all driven, by the way, by the business impact, value creation, cost savings. Like this is probably the number one is efficiency and savings. How do we drive down manual labor-intensive processes? How do we get them out of the way? How do we simplify the organization, which is code for making it smaller? Then you move to creating value with it. Actually, hey, we get more outreach, we get more contacts. This has actually driven sales up in some way. So some of these things you can measure. I'd say as you're again doing the assessment, look for those KPIs. What is your KPI going to be for the creation of an AI agent? Is it going to be, revenue uplift? Is it going to be contacts? Is it going to be, CSAT, customer satisfaction? Is it going to be retention in some way? That's valid too. So please do that. I think the CTOs already have some of this under their belt in terms of, the coding stuff that's out there. But you're going to have to figure out for your business what is appropriate, right? What's going to advance the way you do business? What's going to save you the most money? What's going to create value for you? You have to have those ROIs and those KPIs figured out. But the one industry I will say that is being affected right now, and I wanted to highlight this specifically. I wrote about it 2 weeks ago. The guys at Anderson Horowitz wrote about it about 4 weeks ago, and this is BPOs, or is another name for global systems integrators, systems integrators. The same companies, by the way, right now that are talking to you and trying to get your business in terms of, hey, we can help you integrate AI, we can help you build AI agents. They themselves will be interrupted and disrupted by AI agents. Why? Because they do a ton of manual BPO work today, right? You may or may not have some of those contracts, some of those $30 million business process outsourcing contracts, to take offshore and nearshore to get some of that work out of your organization. Rise the rising sun kind of contact centers as well, which are great. All of that can be agentified, right, and scaled in some way. So the good news is that you may benefit from AI agents indirectly. Go to your suppliers, go to your, BPO partners, your integration partners. They're already telling you how great AI is and how, you can save. Ask them the question, what are you doing to save? What are you doing to make your processes more efficient? How's your work getting better? And how's that going to drive down the bill for me? So if you're looking for an immediate takeout without having to do a ton of work, go back to the suppliers and ask them some of these, questions. It's a tough question, right? We're on this side too. I get it. I was on the business side 10 years ago, and we had these kind of contract negotiations as well. They're not easy, right? Prices rise. But now with AI, there's a real opportunity here to see where you can take out some of the fluff that is in some of the BPO work. So great news for you. So here's what we're getting directly from clients. I'll wrap this up shortly, right? So this is the real reason I think everyone is here, right? We have a lot of very realistic clients, right? We've had these discussions in depth. Some of them know that, a $200 a month agent is not going to replace a full-time employee anytime soon, but it may be a lift and it may be a great way to supplement some work and speed some things up. So they're willing to try it out. They absolutely want to believe in the process and they want to bring them in there, but not at the cost of the way they do business today. Any profitable, money-making enterprise is not going to throw away all the hard work that they've done, just for the promise of what AI and agents could streamline in the future. Any changes have to align with the business objectives that they have. They have to be constructive, not destructive. You're not throwing everything out. There has to be a real business use case for it, right? You have to prove, that this is going to be valuable in some way, shape, or form, either take out time of a process, save you money in some way, or accrue money in some way. I think that's the thing that you have to care about. No one is leading the fight right now. It's not a, I know it's not great to hear that there's just not somebody you can go to now and buy these great things from. There are a lot of smaller companies that have stood up and, are building $200 a month agents that you can quote unquote rent or buy or subscribe to. but a lot of the foundational model builders are, kind of building this capability in themselves. And by the end of the year, they may have, the disruptive capability to just for you to spin up an agent on your own. What I think is going to matter is some domain-specific agents. And for that, I think about, again, regulated industries, domains that have a very hard, concept that maybe are not consumer focused, maybe are B2B, that have very specific information constructs to them, where a domain-specific agent built for your concern, hey, we do real estate, debt and equity. We need a specific agent for that. Yeah, you do, because you're not going to, OpenAI is not going to have that out of the box for you. So you may be going to third-party domain-specific agent providers that'll give you the capability for your specific domain. Um, but, for now, I think, just keep an eye out. You can deploy some of this today for sure. You can test this out, and I think that's worth doing. Back to the example that I had about the RFPs, that was absolutely worth doing and not waiting for, because the immediacy of the gain there was present. There was immediate save, and we could easily calculate the cost of implementation of that agent process versus the speeding up of the RFP process and what that would save in time and money and bring in terms of revenue. That was an easy calculation to make. Hey, if I can do if instead of doing 4 RFPs a month, I can do 20, sign me up. Like, that's just, and my win rate on those is about 5%. That's an easy calculation to make. And so spending, $500,000 on that proof of concept to build out there is well worth it. So, be smart about it. I'll just reiterate again, code efficiency is outside of the mix here. Everyone is already, I think, implementing that. Most large organizations, engineering firms have some sort of experience with a copilot or an additional process that they're using. Get Cursor, take it for what you will, or even Claude just released a part of their own code helper. So as you're discussing this in your organization, think about, the readiness, think about how you're going to iterate it and manage it. Think about the governance and risk piece of it too. It's really, really important. I'm sure if you're in a regulated organization, your risk, legal, and compliance people are going to ask you about it, and your security people. The change management aspect is so overlooked, right now. How do people interact with agents? How do they, work with a agentic coworker? That has yet to be determined, and I think you have to bake that at an organization, enterprise by enterprise. It's not going to be the same for any enterprise. So, really, really think about it. I think we're just about here at Q&A. I spent a little bit more time than I wanted to over some of these topics, but I got to say it continues to be really important. It's the new AI. I hate to say that. The old AI, machine learning, fraud models, all those architectures still have their place, but a lot of mind share right now is being eaten up by, how AI agents can really impact the future workforce. And I think it's warranted. I think they will. We just don't know the impact yet, right? Absolutely need to start small here and then think to build on it. Start for sure to be as agnostic as you can. Build flexible architectures. And I think anyone who's responsible for this in their organization, this is a current discussion point. So I will stop there and take questions. I'm happy to talk about this. We have a few minutes to discuss it. And again, I will make myself available to anyone after this. This is what I do, and I really enjoy doing it. So please, hit us up, and I'm happy to talk to you individually about it too. Question: Claude Code and Augment. Yeah, great point. Yeah, Claude Code is fantastic for those of you who have used it. I have as you can imagine, about every AI agent architecture and toy on my system, as we speak. Claude continues to be, a very consistent and I think pretty well documented capable code assistant. It is the basis of very hard to control as well. Yeah. Yeah. I think Claude is the basis of Cursor, right? For those of you who know, Cursor is very, very popular. Um, there's something else out there, uh, and it is not quite agentic, but is assistive, right? So it's a CLI, it's a command line interface tool. It's called Warp, very similar to like a code assistant, but for those who deal on the command line every day, man, for all those things that you forgot over your career, like you just ask it and it pops it up right in the console, and then you're good to go. Um, the thing that I tell everyone, it doesn't excuse you from knowing what you're doing and how you're doing it and what it does, but it sure as heck, gets you there quite a bit faster. Um, and that's the thing to think about these agents too. What we see as, data, AI professionals, IT professionals, we've already seen the benefit, I think, to a large degree. Where is that benefit for our business counterparts? I think it's going to be agentic in the future. I don't know that the um, query and response methodology is really enough for them at the moment. I think it's nice and it takes out a little bit of work. But, think about, some regulations, that have changed the way industry works. Think about MiFID in Europe and, how you had to pay for analysts and, all that good stuff. This could be your analyst of the future, and you could have an AI analyst of the future. Hey, I'd like to know about, the last 3 years of earnings of this company. Give me their market perspective in terms of competitors, and then produce a report for me on the potential investor impact if I were to invest with them in, some sort of bond yield? That's a pretty in-depth question, and the agents today are on the cusp of helping you answer that. For some of the agents that do that really well, by the way, I got to say, I'm a huge fan of Gemini, and some of the deep research capabilities. The team here has put some of the things through their paces. Then some of us we like, for some of the query response and interactive stuff and deep responses, we like ChatGPT. For a lot of the deep research, we like Gemini. For a lot of coding, we like Claude. Those are just three buckets that we have today. But they are, really fantastic tools. And I think as they mature, as they get more agentified in the future, these tasks that you'll be able to farm out are going to really affect the workflow of the future.
One thing that I haven't heard you say, and the charts were a little small to make sure I could follow the different architectures. But I've had some success with combining machine learning with LLMs, right? Because the LLMs, the hallucinations and non-deterministic nature, that's kind of the value in the feature as opposed to a bug for the creativity, right? You don't want Toyota doesn't want all of their marketing campaigns to be the same, right? It needs the creativity. But when you're doing a business process automation task that's more towards deterministic, we've used machine learning to develop the confidence, right? If you can be 75% accurate, but when the 75% accuracy is, that can be a huge value. If it's 95% accurate and you don't know if it's right or not, that's hard, right? So combining machine learning on the confidence of the LLM models, I've had some success with that.
Yeah, I got to say you're absolutely right. So the, deterministic, and I alluded to it a bit before about the deterministic data use, when comparing things like RPA. Yeah, for sure. I think, we can explain some of our machine learning models, right? And we're doing that actually with a client right now around, some checking in terms of abnormalities in some of their data and their output. And so for that anomaly detection kind of process, we're able to see those, that deterministic data, and we're able to see the data and validate it, how it arrived there through that process. Could you do additional processing then afterwards for the language model? Yeah, and then be assured that you're getting very good quality data and an output that has been validated in some way. What's missing are validation platforms. I didn't speak about that a lot, but Jerry, you brought up a great point. I think there are data validation and process validation platforms coming for the agentic space where you'll be able to trace the data going in, the output coming out, and then, see any differences in the process in between and vouch for some of the safety and sanity of that data. I don't think they're mature yet, and they need to be, right? I think the real success to some of these platforms is going to be we can agentify a business process for you, and you have now a trace of, the entire business process flow along the way, where the data was produced, how it was validated and touched, what the output was, and whether it differed in any way from previous output. That's going to be really important in some of these agentic architectures, and I don't think we're there quite at the moment, but it's coming. You have to develop it, as you said, Jerry. Like, if you develop it yourself, you're absolutely sure and but then you have to maintain it. And not every organization is going to have that capability. There'll be a difference, I think, in terms of, the small to medium-sized business and the SMBs versus the large enterprises. SMBs will probably be the best market for agents, right? Who don't have scale and size, who need it, who need to rescale pretty quickly. It's not going to be a replacement play there. It's going to be a capability play. They're going to add capability, add volume, be able to look like a bigger organization, but with a small organizational profile. The risk there, as you so rightly pointed out, is unless you're really sure that what you're generating is high quality, good data, good output, um, getting good customers, a good customer experience, all that good stuff, then you run the risk of damaging your business, your reputation, et cetera. So SMBs may be buyers of agentic platforms. I think they should be really cautious, though, to make sure that the platform has some sort of error checking, handling, data trace, some of the machine learning you're talking about to validate the quality of the data going in and the output coming out. Yeah, really great point. Any other questions I can answer for you?
I've got a question, Thomas. So, we've had various conversations with, whether it be financial institutions who face notorious challenges such as detecting evolving fraud patterns or managing complex risk assessments or scaling personalized financial advising. I know you've mentioned this earlier, but what would be your guidance with regards to how you see AI agents addressing these specific challenges? And do the barriers really fall down to integration, or does it tend to be more technical, regulatory, or organizational resistance from your experience?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the agents are poised to be able to take over some of those processes. And if you think about some of the challenges with things like fraud or detection of anomalies within transactions, and their machine learning process, by the way, they're already there, right? That are back to Jerry's earlier point, are very deterministic. Are based on functions of amounts and things like location, et cetera, but can often fail, right? We see, I've talked to a banking client just last year who had an issue with some of these processes where they're seeing a high rate of false positives and they were trying to tune it, but not quite getting there because there's a decision process there that kind of falls down when you pump it through some of the classical machine learning algorithms, which is a number is a number. And if we say that it's odd that, Nikhil is spending $102 when he usually spends $100, so I'm going to stop that transaction. On the face of it, any human would look at it and go, it's a difference of, 2%. It's very small. Like, that transaction should go through. Um, Maybe an agent makes a better decision there, because, it can tell the difference between, person, transaction, fraud, because you've trained it. I think that is a possibility. I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon because, as you point out, there's still regulatory hurdles. The regulators are going to want to know that you can prove, because right now you can prove via math, why that transaction was stopped. You can prove via the logs and via the algorithm, machine learning algorithm, if it's, especially if it's Fourier based or something like that. The math is there. Like we know why that's happening and we can see it. So there's going to be a bit of regulatory concern. And then from an implementation standpoint, it doesn't look much different. It's still a transaction handoff to something. So it is an integration a different integration that you have to do, but still an integration nonetheless. So I think the challenges are going to be more believability, trust, and regulatory hurdles, and then organizational as well. I know plenty of financial organizations that go like, why would I need that? I have a system that works well for me. Um, like even think of things like some of the cryptocurrency networks or some of those capabilities, and you talk to leaders and they go, I have Swift now, why do I need that? So they'll point to very very well structured organizational capabilities and industry capabilities that are out there that perform just well, and they don't no one's getting hurt right now, so why would you replace it for the promise of what, an extra 15% better on some of your fraud capabilities. So there's going to be a risk to overcome. There's going to be an organizational process to overcome too. It's a great question. And I'll say some of the same questions that we have with our clients right now. It is all about, testing the waters. What is it going to take? And then there's a cost benefit analysis to it. Um, and in the regulated industries, it comes with, how much scrutiny will I get, versus the ability to replace it and, take out, a fair amount of cost structures there. Most of agentic, I really do think most of the agentic workflows are going to come for human involved business processes. Like those are the takeouts that we know today are, you know, still prone to human error to a degree. Um, and maybe, you may be able to replace them with a process that, yes, still is error prone to a degree, but it happens much, much faster and you can get it done. And that's just as good. Like I'll take the same amount of errors, but if I get done, 90% faster and there's still a human there to check it, that means I can increase volume. That's
Or
still,
potentially even less error, even if it's not 100%, it could be less error prone than the manual.
yeah. Well, I mean, look at Citibank. Citibank's massive error. Like they think and there's a writer I follow in Bloomberg who talked about this, so please feel free to go read it up about it. They accidentally forwarded a client about over $1 trillion, through just a key, inadvertently keying it because their interface gets loaded with zeros first as a default. Like their user interfaces are so bad, and there was a bond issue they did the year before that where they credited all the money for outstanding bonds to, some investment firm, and they went to court about it. That was an $800 million blunder. Humans are not infallible for sure. So some of the industry is looking at that and going like, oh yeah, look, like it's already error prone. Please let me get there faster and maybe I'll have less errors because the computer can tell the difference between zeros in an interface and the person who just like types it there. Like there is a careful process for it. That's the argument for the agents for sure. Like, heaven help you if you have some of those error-prone processes, they're going to be the ones on the front line getting taken out by any agentic process that can even prove to, a 10% degree that it can do better. Please, I will absolutely introduce that into any organization at a moment's notice if that is the business use case. They'll eat it up for sure. But how many processes of those are there remains to be seen, and that's the other thing, by the way, and probably why we're all here. Some of this information is really opaque right now. Not everybody talks about it, either because it's not in their interest to do so. Why would I tell you, Jerry, that I'm, 90% more efficient at filling out RFPs when you're my competitor? I don't want you to know that. Or, the fact that they haven't done it as much and they're not as mature as they let on to be. Um, any other questions?
Hey, Thomas, great presentation. On that topic, right? agents, multi-collaborating, multi-agent scenario, my struggle is that uh, what kind of governance we need to keep, right? Because to make agents are doing exactly what it is there. That's first thing. Second thing is that at scale, especially if you are deploying agents, lightweight agents, at edge infrastructure, not at the centralized infrastructure, because data is always going to be a big bottleneck. I mean, on data, the consumption and all those things. There is a direct cost and there is an indirect cost. And the struggle I have is that LLMs are, whether you take OpenAI or, none of them, that they're going to give you freebie stuff, but when you start actually using them, the cost can be exponential. So obviously it boils down to the, small language models that actually are proprietary to use your data because you don't want to expose your data to somebody else and then you're in big trouble because somebody else can use it. So my question to you is that we don't have answers, I know for sure. What are your thoughts? I mean, where do you see and when do you see most of our clients adopt, whether agentic or AI or AI in general at scale?
Yeah, you bring up a really good point. Most people that we talk to don't take in the cost of inference, right? The cost of running the agent in the background. It gets expensive really, really quickly as you scale up. It's almost like a hockey stick. So I think for sure they're not thinking about that, and they need to, which means that they, rather than go with some of the cloud providers, the large language model providers, foundational model builders, you do want to localize and you go with a Llama 3 and you look and you run it on your local infrastructure. It's a fixed cost. You know what it is. So I think there's definitely a conversation going on about that. My thinking is that that might be the right way to go, especially if an organization like some regulated industries already have a ton of GPU compute. Insurance industries, financial industries, back when I was doing interest rate shocks, I had a ton of GPU compute on-prem to do, GGY and interest rate shocks because I had to talk to the Fed or my local regulator. Um, the same is true even in the cloud. They probably already have it. It's a sunk cost and they can just run it on their own, without having to go out to some of these providers. So I think that is a decision that you need to make case by case or have an architectural perspective on it. And if you're a big enough organization, hey, this is how we're going to pursue the language model architecture. We're going to localize it. We're going to, pre-train it or retrain it here. We're going to fine tune it and then use our documents, proprietary documents, so we don't leak it out to the cloud. That's a choice. The other choice is, hey, we're not that big and we're not, an organization that can handle that on our own. And we're not AI experts, but we want to use it. So we're going to rent it or lease it or buy it from the very large foundational model builders or whoever offers it for $200 a month, which there is somebody doing that, $200 a month, and you can get quote unquote an agent. I think there's room for both, and it's going to be an organizational decision that you have to make, whether what's appropriate for you. But it's a great question. And to your question about like many agents in communication and what are they doing with each other, that's what MCP, the Model Context Protocol, was meant to solve by Anthropic. What it doesn't do right now, it's communication for inter-agent and tool use interaction. I still stick to my guns and say that I have not seen any framework out there that explains to me what is going on with every agent and can give me like a dashboard that I can look at and explain, yes, I put this process through multiple agents and here's what I got. And I can look at a, set of information and figure out whether there's an anomaly there or not. It just doesn't exist yet. You have to roll your own or have someone build it for you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the answer. One final question on that one. There is also a question comes in. How do you know that these agents are actually doing exactly what they are actually advertising? Who is actually policing that? I mean, you have to believe at face value. Anyway,
Yeah,
that's it.
there is no, I know some you've seen with the model builders start to put in chain of thought, which is great because now you can see what's being done. I think that's going to increase. And so the proof in some of these architectures and some of these agent platforms, you're going to have to ask to see the chain of thought. But then in any multi-agent or big process where you're doing like thousands of things a day, you have to have some way to analyze it, consistently. So That again is not there. How do you take the agent output and analyze it? You may have to do that yourself. So it is a trust thing for a couple of these Asian providers. I don't like being in that position, especially if I'm a regulated industry. I want to know the full chain of thought. I want to know the data that was used. So my guess is, and my very unsatisfying answer to you is that you may have to do a little bit of work as you implement these agents to get that information and do the analysis on your own, and establish trust. I think we are about at time. This is fantastic. So I want to say thank you to everyone. We love doing these things. I will reiterate that I'm available to you and your teams to talk about this anytime you would like. Please reach out to our team to arrange that. But otherwise, please enjoy your week and thank you for attending our presentation.